The Tomb in Cholon Town. A ghost story from the old quarter. Among the crowded streets of Cholon, where red paper lanterns burn at every doorway, where the sweet rot of incense mingles with cinnamon blossom and the blue exhaust of 100 passing motorbikes, a young architect named Huynh Cuong sat in the back of a horse-drawn cart and told himself he was not afraid. The driver, an old man who had introduced himself only as Mr. Luke, said nothing. His back was straight and still. His hands on the reins did not move. The city fell away behind them. The road climbed. Fog came down between the old eucalyptus trees like something breathing, slow, heavy, deliberate. The air changed. It became wet and cold and dense with a smell that Cuong, an educated man and a rational one, could only describe later as the breath of the buried. He pulled his jacket tighter and said nothing. The Lee family estate stood at the top of the rise like something left over from another century, which it was. The main house was tall and dark, its shutters closed against the night, the red tiles of its roof vanishing into the mist overhead. Oil lamps burned in the windows with a light that wavered rather than steadied, as though even the flames were uneasy. 6 people were waiting inside. Their faces were pale. Their clothing was old, the kind of formal Chinese dress that had not been fashionable for decades, preserved with the careful attention of people who had stopped noticing time pass. The lamplight threw their shadows long across the walls and did not flatter any of them. Mr. Luke spoke first. "This is Huynh Cuong, the architect sent by Uncle Tam due to draw up plans for the guesthouse development. Please assist him during his stay." Of the 6, 2 young women stood apart from the others. Not dramatically, they were not trying to be noticed. They simply were noticed, the way a candle is noticed in a dark room, not because it announces itself but because everything else recedes around it. The younger one smiled first. Her voice, when she spoke, was the most pleasant voice Cuong had ever heard, honeyed and soft, with something underneath it that he could not quite name, like music heard through water. "I am Li Deng," she said. "And this is my elder sister, Li Hong. Welcoming guests and showing them around, that is our responsibility. There's really no need for instructions." Cuong allowed himself a small smile, though something in the back of his mind turned over slowly, the way a sleeper turns in a dream. They were beautiful in a way that felt slightly wrong, the kind of beauty that belongs to portraits rather than to living people. Their skin was white and perfect in the lamp's uncertain light. Their eyes were bright. But the brightness in them was not the brightness of happiness or curiosity. It was something older and stiller, like light at the bottom of a well. "You've accepted your duties before I've even told you my name," he said lightly. Li Deng laughed, a quick, delighted sound, her head tilting to one side. "We have beauty and charm, elder brother. You won't get lost with us to guide you. Unless," a small, teasing pause, "you're afraid of us." Before he could answer, the elder sister spoke. She had been quiet until now, and her voice, when it came, carried a weight the younger girls did not. "But if you want us to show you around," said Li Hong, "you'll have to take off your leather shoes. Wear rubber sandals like the family does. Otherwise—" She left the sentence unfinished, which was somehow worse than finishing it. The older members of the household made a show of scolding the girls for their boldness, but their eyes were fond. Indulgent. The look of people who could refuse nothing to the ones they loved. Within minutes, the 2 sisters had taken Cuong by the hands, one on each side, and pulled him laughing out through the back door and into the night. "It's so boring in there with all the adults," Li Hong murmured against his ear as they walked, her breath warm on his skin. don't you think? The ground stretched away from the house into darkness and descending mist. Old trees. Uneven ground. And scattered among the roots and the wet grass, half hidden by the fog, the angular outlines of old stone. Tombs. Not many, perhaps a dozen, but placed with the kind of care that suggested deliberate arrangement rather than mere burial convenience. They were old. The inscriptions on the closest ones were worn smooth, the names below the surface of legibility. Two of the tombs stood slightly apart from the others, oriented precisely to the southeast, with a view down the slope toward the lights of the distant city. Cuong stopped and studied them with a professional eye. The feng shui here is exceptional, he said, almost to himself. The position, the elevation, the orientation, it's rare to find something this well sited. He paused. But the development plan will be complicated. These graves are directly in the footprint of the proposed building. Li Hong stepped closer to him. Close enough that he could feel the temperature of her, or rather, the absence of it, the faint wrongness of a body that gave no warmth. Dung and I have been talking, she said softly. We'd like our room, when the house is built, to be right here. This exact spot. Her hand touched his arm. Would you build it here, elder brother? Over the tombs? For us? Cuong stepped back slightly. Over the. A grave is only a house for the dead, Li Dung said from his other side, her voice like silk drawn over a blade. She had moved without him hearing her move. And if the dead are willing, if they have no objection, then where's the harm in a house for the living built above them? The fog thickened. The temperature dropped. Around them, the old eucalyptus trees groaned in a wind that Cuong had not felt a moment before. The two sisters laughed, light, pure, crystalline, and ran ahead of him up the slope, beckoning. He followed. Of course he followed. He could not have explained later why he found it so difficult not to. The ground was treacherous in the dark, wet clay, slick grass, tree roots hidden under the fog. He was not used to the terrain. His breath came short. He did not feel himself falling until he was already down. He hit the earth and Li Dung went down with him, his weight catching her, his arms around her by reflex, and then somehow, in the confusion of the fall and the fog and the spinning of the sky, his mouth was against hers. The kiss was sweet. That was the first thing. Sweet in a way that no kiss had been before, cool as jade held in a palm, scented with cinnamon and night-blooming flowers. His head swam. The ground seemed very far away. He felt himself sinking, not downward but inward, as though the borders between him and the dark were dissolving. Then he felt the cold. Not the cold of the night, not the cold of a person sitting outdoors. This was a different cold entirely, the cold of stone at the bottom of a well that the sun has never touched. Her lips against his were the temperature of something that had been underground a very long time, and the breath that came from her carried the smell of old blood and gray ash and the deep damp of sealed earth. And something was being taken from him. He felt it with absolute certainty, a drawing out, slow and rhythmic, like blood leaving a wound. Not his blood. Something less replaceable than blood. He tried to pull back. Her hands caught him. Her fingers were at his back, and they were stronger than hands had any right to be, and her nails, long, sharp, cold as needles, traced lines through his shirt that left burning tracks on his skin beneath. Her hair fell around both of them, black and heavy, and it was somehow everywhere, coiling against his throat, catching at his wrists, smelling of chrysanthemums and turned earth. Don't go, She whispered into the kiss, and her voice from this close had harmonics in it that no human throat should have produced, a vibration that came from somewhere lower than the chest, somewhere that was not inside her at all. "We're so cold. We've been so cold for such a long time." Before he could respond, before he could think, Huynh descended. She came from above him like a white shadow, her weight settling over both of them, and she kissed him with an urgency that was less like desire and more like need, the need of a drowning thing for air, the need of a dying fire for fuel. Her lips were colder than her sister's. Much colder. The cold of deep rock. Her teeth, and he felt them clearly, felt their edges, sharp and wrong, grazed his lower lip. A small pain. And then the warmth of his own blood on his tongue. They took it. Both of them. He felt them take it, not with revulsion but with something that was worse than revulsion, an ecstasy he could not account for, a pleasure that ran alongside the horror like a second current in the same river. Their voices blended in his ears, inseparable from each other, indistinguishable from the sound of wind through stone. "Stay with us. Don't leave us alone again. You're so warm. You're so alive. Your blood is so warm." He could not move. He was held between them, two bodies that should have been soft and yielding and were instead as immovable as the earth itself. Their skin in the moonlight was white as paper, and beneath it, just barely visible, a tracery of dark veins ran like the roots of old trees, like cracks in old stone, spreading from their wrists and their throats toward their still hearts. Their eyes were open. They were watching him. And their eyes were the eyes of wells, beautiful at the surface, and then, below the surface, nothing but dark descending forever. "We have been without love for too long," Huynh said against his mouth, and her voice broke on the last word, and what came out of the breaking was not tears but something older and heavier. "Give us your warmth. Just your warmth. That's all." He sank. He woke in the house. Daylight, but pale, reluctant daylight, the light of late afternoon rather than morning. His body felt as though someone had replaced his bones with wet sand. His skin was cold everywhere. Mr. Luke sat in the chair beside the bed, watching him with an expression that contained the specific sadness of a man who has seen this before and found no way to prevent it. "You're awake," the old man said. "It's been a full day and night." He helped Cuong outside, one arm under his, taking most of his weight. They walked, slowly, because Cuong's legs were unreliable beneath him, down to the place on the eastern slope where the two separate tombs stood. Cuong read the names on the stones. Li Ti Hung. Li Ti Dung. He turned. Mr. Luke was gone. In his place, on the wet ground at Cuong's feet, words were forming in the dark earth, not carved, not written, but appearing, as though being pressed up from below. "Four tombs surround these two. One of them is mine. Li Luke. Their uncle, in life and after it." He walked downhill. At the bottom of the slope, a very old man waited in the gray morning light, small and bent, dressed in old brown cotton, his white hair elaborately pinned, a string of dried garlic tucked behind his collar. "Mr. Cuong," the old man said. "I have been here since before you woke." His name was Li Van Trong. He was the grandfather of Hung In Dung. He told his story in the patient, measured way of someone who has been waiting a long time to tell it and has made a kind of peace with the waiting. "There were 6 people in that house," he said. "Myself, my wife, our son, his wife, and the 2 girls. An architect came, another one, years ago. He was sent, as you were, to design a development on this land. He was also intended, by some of the family, as a possible husband for one of the girls. The old man's voice did not change. He murdered all 6 of us in a single night. For the property. He calculated that with no living heirs, the claim to the land would lapse. Cuong said nothing. The girls died last. They were the youngest. They had never been given the chance to be loved in the way that young women ought to be loved. He paused. They have been here ever since. They hate architects, or they did, at first. The man who killed them was an architect. You are the 5th to come here since then. The other 4 did not wake. Then why? Because Luke still had a conscience, the old man said simply. Even after death, he retained enough of one to intervene. He brought you back from the edge. Not far back, not as far as I would have wished, but back. He turned to look at the hill above them, his expression carrying the particular grief of someone surveying a damage that cannot be repaired. They are not evil, those girls. They are lonely. They have been lonely for a very long time. What they did to you, the kisses, the cold, the taking, it was not malice. It was the only form of love they could still give. The love of the dead for the living, which is always a kind of hunger, and always a kind of grief. He smiled then, or something that had once been a smile and retained only the shape of one. Then the mist took him, and he was gone. Huynh Cuong walked down to the road. He did not look back at the hill. He had decided before he reached the bottom of the slope that he would not look back, and he held to this through an effort of will that left him trembling. But the wind came after him anyway. And in it, faint as perfume from a room that has been closed for decades, drifting between the eucalyptus trees and the old tombs and the fog that never fully lifted from that hill. Don't go. 2 voices, twined together, sweet and devastated in equal measure. Stay with us. Please. After that night, Huynh Cuong left Cholon and did not return. He changed his professional focus. He took on different clients. He rebuilt his life in the rational, sunlit world of deadlines and blueprints and strong black coffee, and most of the time it held together perfectly well. But sleep was different. In sleep, the ordinary rules did not apply. In sleep, every night when the city darkened and the noise of the waking world fell away, he found himself back on that hill, the fog rolling in from below, the eucalyptus sighing, the stones of the old tombs glistening with dew. And they were there. 2 shapes at the edge of the lamplight, white-dressed and still, their dark hair loose around their shoulders, their eyes carrying that particular brightness, not the brightness of the living, but something older and more patient. Waiting. Always waiting. And when he woke, heart pounding, sheets damp, the smell of cinnamon and cold earth fading in the dark of his room, he could never be entirely certain whether the dream had been a warning or an invitation. Or whether, somewhere in the locked geography of what had happened to him on that hill, the distinction had ceased to matter. Stay with us, the voices said. We have been so cold for so long. And the worst of it, the thing Huynh Cuong never told anyone, was that some part of him, the part that had felt that cold sweetness and that terrible warmth, understood exactly what they meant. And wanted, sometimes, to answer.